listeners, my name is Jamie and welcome to the Gauntlet Podcast. I'm joined by my co-host, Lowell. Thank you so much for joining us, Lowell.
Oh, so glad to be here again.
And we have with us this month, Callum. Callum is the creator of the Release podcast, as well as the Cafe Release show. He is part of the RPG Academy and also the designer of Paris Gondo, the life-saving magic of inventorying.
Well, hello everyone in Radioland. I'm very, very thankful to be on the Gauntlet podcast. I've been listening for a little while and I love my experience with the Gauntlet community. So yeah, it's really an honor to be here on the microphone.
We're so happy to have you. For our first segment, listeners, each of us goes over the RPGs that we got to play in January and Feb, and we talk in depth about one of them that we got to play on the Gauntlet calendar. So let's start with Lowell. How was your gaming in January and February?
It was pretty good. I got to play some more interesting things I hadn't played before. So off Gauntlet, been playing with the face-to-face group that moved online. We did 13th Age and Star Trek Express. That continues to go well. On the Gauntlet, last night we played one of your new games, Jamie, the unnamed game.
Ooh.
I'm still working on a name.
That you had workshopped with a French Discord.
I did. They're super helpful.
As well, I got to play Raccoon Sky Pirates, which I talked about a previous episode, and Little Katie's Tea Party. And then Space Worm versus Moonicorn, which Sherry talked about on a previous episode. And then my hack of Before the Storm from the Seven Wonders collection that I hacked to be a superhero game. And then the game that I've been running actually for quite a while that I wanted to talk about today is Night's Black Agents Express. This is another one of my hacks to make a game that I like fit with my GMing style. This has been...
So is that what Express means? Like Lowell's brand?
Cutting out all the rules that I won't ever use, that kind of thing. Night's Black Agents is a gumshoe game, and it is about spies that have been disowned by their agencies because they found out about supernatural stuff, particularly vampires. And now they're working to figure out how far that conspiracy extends and really where they can hit the vampires and what their weaknesses are. So there's a whole cons pyramid is what they call it. It's a mix of action investigation with the gumshoe resource spend system. I want to say before I go any further, I have always been a big supporter of Gumshoe. I've backed all of the pre-orders. I've run it quite a bit. Trail of Cthulhu, Ashen Stars, Esoterrorist, Bubble Gumshoe. But there's some
I was waiting for the but.
I know,
it was ready to land. It was like hovering above us.
There's some things about the way that Gumshoe works that don't really fit with the way I like to run. It's too granular on the investigation side, which means that there are way too many investigation skills. This is a downfall for Night's Black Agents and Ashen Stars. Because each of those skills has points to spend potentially from, you've got to track all of those things. And then on the resolution side, it's too granular, where any combat is in multiple rolls and spends and tracking of those things. And then damage works a slightly different way, but it's still a resource pool. I appreciate that, and I love that people enjoy it and really get a lot out of it. But it has always been a little too slow, a little too in-depth for where I want to be. So I took from Power by the Apocalypse, I took from the Solo Ops, which is a one-on-one version of Night's Black Agents, and also from the Yellow King RPG that Pelgrane has done, which simplifies some of the system. Mm. Basically, I took all the investigation skills. First, I cut the list down by at least a third. I put them in categories, and each category has a pool of points to spend from rather than individual. I put the general abilities into categories as well. And in the original Gumshoe, it's you roll a d6 and you spend your points and you bid into it. Basically, the change is that you're spending the points from that pool, but it's for a PBTA roll.
Ooh.
So, the standard 6 or less, 7 to 9, 10 plus. A lot of those moves we make up on the fly, but I have some set ones for combat. The spending of points from a pool to do rolls, that's from Apocalypse Keys. I will admit that that's the inspiration for that. I made some other changes, like having talents, and health. So this is Nice Black Agents in spirit, but there's some pretty heavy mechanical changes. And I will have a link to a copy of the Character Keeper in notes if people want to look at that. So I've been running this since December. We're going into our 13th session this coming week. So we did a kind of a prologue one I did in December to test it out. And now we've been doing ongoing. And I really like it. Like, it is held together over the long haul. I was very nervous about that, how it would sustain itself, because I'm always like that with hacks.
Right.
But it's worked.
Ooh.
The investigation still feels like Gumshoe. Gumshoe is you don't roll to investigate. You go in, if you have the ability, you're going to get some basic information, and then the GM is usually saying, do you want to make a spend to get more information to add to that? There's some more to it, but that's the basic feel of it. Having that list cut down works. Players are able to kind of comprehend what they know and don't know pretty easily. And the pools have felt pretty tight, like they run out of points sometimes, and they have to kind of figure out how they want to take alternate approaches to things. The general resolution feels much more comfortable to me. And I say this as somebody who's like running 13th Age, where it's an hour for a combat, But I like, especially with this kind of game where it's all about the momentum and keeping that Bourne identity kind of pace to it. The combats feel faster, they're smoother, they're easier to manage. We're spending just enough time in those action sequences for people to do something cool and have it go right, or in several cases for have it to go terribly wrong. We had a session where the players split up and they blew both of their tasks and ended up not stopping a bombing and getting blamed for it, and not being able to do this like a cover identity meet, and in fact one of them getting a sniper bullet in them. And that was a hell of a session. Like
it sounds like it, yeah.
But it was a fun failure, it sounds like.
It's great.
Which is what really matters, I find.
Yeah,
exactly.
It doesn't feel like the slow bleed of attrition that you can kind of get from regular Gumshoe. It's a very much, okay, we did this. Okay, now we're in the boiling water. Now we're in the pot. The talents they adapted, they have them in solo ops, and so I stole those, and I put some other stuff in that are more like moves. They're fun. People have a handful of them. You check box to use them. They get essentially used once per mission, so they have a kind of a weight to them. On this first pass, the economy has felt right. They've gotten to the end of sessions where like, we would really like a refresh now with like some more points back because we are running bare bones. And now that has changed a little bit as we've played along, and they've gotten a few more points, but it still felt right. Game economies like Fate and all games they have to spend points and stuff, those are so hard. So I'm happy that at least at this first stage with this group, in the way that I'm running, that balance is working.
It's so tough. I mean, that's the point, really. You really want things to stay on a knife's edge, because if you have too much points, they feel worthless at the end. And if you run out of them too fast, then it's just frustrating. So yeah, that balance is really key.
Yeah, it's not a lot of fun either way. Yeah.
One of the nice things that is in Gumshoe that sometimes gets forgotten is that you have this thing that they call in Nice Black Agents tactical fact-finding benefits, where you spend an investigation point to give yourself a little pool to do actions. And that makes the investigations have a little more weight to them. And that's been fun to see people justify why knowing this about military science gives them a bonus when they go into this combat situation, those kinds of spends. The other thing I want to say is I really love Nice Black Agents. I love that idea of trying to piece together the conspiracy. You're really doing the kind of down and dirty, we're going to bug this office, but then they go in and suddenly there's a vampire. And they're completely unprepared for it, and they're nasty and they're dangerous. Alan got left behind at the safe house one time and only then realized that a vampire had followed them back and that he was alone with it. And that's how we ended one of the sessions.
Nice.
And they've been able to deal with some of the supernatural threats, but every time it has felt like this is a challenge that we might not make it out of here.
That sounds great.
So I've been very happy. Having said all that, those are things I like. I'm very happy. I think Nice Black Agents is a great premise. That does a lot of my work. That's a lot of the heavy lifting. Some things I'm not as sure about right now. I will admit that we haven't done a chase yet. Night's Black Agents has a set of mechanics for chases. I've kind of done a system for it, but we haven't really had the opportunity, and I'm still not sure whether the mechanics that I've come up with for chases in PBTA are going to work, like they're going to feel like an extended thing. Mm-hmm. A chase shouldn't be just one roll.
Right.
Yeah.
It needs to have a beginning, middle, and end, and I've got a system for that. We haven't done it yet, and I'll admit that a couple of times where we had the opportunity, I was like, I'm not sure I want to test that yet.
No.
I've leaned away from it. So I really need to do that. I'm also not entirely sure about how I've done damage. It's not bad, and it's felt pretty good, but I've got a mechanic for doing conditions where you can mark a condition not to take a bunch of damage, and I'm not sure whether that makes it too easy or not. Again, that's another economy question that I'm not sure about. So those are sort of the mechanical things. Here's the other thing. I'm going to pause here. Let me settle in my chair.
Ooh, wow.
These are games with modules, with scenarios. This Dracula Dossier is this big campaign module, and there are a couple of these, multi-part campaign adventure things and so on. And this game has taken a lot more planning and prep than anything I've run in quite a while.
No.
It's less than when I've run regular Gumshoe, because there's a lot of things I don't have to worry about, but it is still a game by its very nature that requires you to plan and prep, and that has been great because I'm not doing that for every game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Other games I'm able to do pure improv, or play off of it. We work on things, but boy, I have forgotten what it's like to really, really do that. I'm enjoying it. Well, at the end, we'll have done something like 16, 17 sessions, and that will have been good, but I'll also be great to catch my breath because it has been so much work. I think what I haven't really taken a look at is some of the alternatives to that. Like Alan Rees has done his Against the Dark Conspiracy. Like me, he's been trying to work on adaptations of Night's Black Agents, and he has an even more streamlined approach to the same thing, but with Cthulhu Dark. It's a little bit different. I like having a little bit of crunch because I'm a very old gamer, and sometimes I like having a little bit of that
the way
detail.
You said that.
I am. So my takeaway overall, I think this basic system adaptation they've done works. I might try it with Esoterrorists or Ashen Stars. Those are other of the Gumshoe games that I like. I've just been enjoying myself. I've been running, it'll be 4 months. I'll have run it straight weekly, which for the Gauntlet is a long time to run. And I'm pretty happy. It has scratched the itch because I've owned all the books. And it's one of those times when I spent all the money, I own all the books, I would like to run it, and I finally have, and that's been great for me.
All right, and so that moves on to Callum. How was your January and February gaming, or what games would you like to talk about this time?
So I'm going to cheat a little bit and drift a bit in December because my January has been somewhat quiet.
Yeah.
I played mostly off Gauntlet those last few months. I played Mere Gods, which was run by the author Tan Chao Han at Session Zero Con. I played some Just Another Gaming System, or JAGS for short, by Marco Chacon, who is American, he's not French, despite his name, which is sort of a universal. It's interesting. There's a couple of games, this one and Brindlewood Bay. I tweeted something and said, I would like to play something like that. Someone posted pictures. I think it was a professional photographer who posted pictures of drive-ins in the US. And gorgeous pictures of their signage, neon signage, very American. And I was like, wow, that would be cool to play something American. And the author was like, hey, do you want to play my game? I can hack my own system to make it work with something American, and I'm going to run this game for you. And I said yes. And around the same time, there was also Mark Macher. I hope I pronounced that well as well. I said I wanted to really play some Brindlewood Bay, and he offered to, and he ran the first session I ever played of Brindlewood Bay, which I loved. And now I've got my own hack in project at the moment. I played recently for Valentine's Day. We played a 2 players. I mean, you can play more players, but we played my first For the Queen game. With my wife. We played Final Lap, which is by a French designer. Apparently, For the Queen is extremely popular in France. There's a lot of hack. and they're available online. There's even I'm not sure if the platform is French or something else, but there seems to be more games.
forthedrama.com.
Yeah. So Final Lap is there, and you play the final race in a circuit. There's been multiple races. You know who's going to win. It's going to be the champion. She's going to win no matter what. But yeah, you pull your card and your prompts, and you have flashbacks and stuff happen during the last lap regarding what's going to happen. And I'm not into race cars. My wife is not either, but I sold her saying, hey, it's like Rush the movie, which we saw same. I don't even know why we watched that movie. We were like, we're not into cars, but we watched Rush probably because she likes Chris Hemsworth and I like Daniel Bruhl. And we loved the movie, the drama in it. The game sort of emulates that, although, as usual with me, things took at the end, my character was more Matthew Berry than Chris Hemsworth or Daniel Bruhl. I'm playing some Cthulhu Pulp, The Masks of Nyarlathotep, which is streamed every Tuesday with Garblack Games. So that's hopefully is going to scratch my prepped long-running campaign itch there. Mm-hmm. And I've been running some, as usual, I'm running a lot of demonstrations of Paris Gondo, the life-saving magic of inventorying at various online conventions. The next one's going to be at Festival Draconis, which is a convention which is supposed to be physical in French Canada. And of course, they're doing it online, which is another opportunity for me to run something at a convention I could not attend otherwise. Meanwhile, on the Gauntlet, I joined a campaign of Heart. I replaced a player. We had a session with Leandro. It's always an amazing pleasure to play with him. We just played one session. So that's why on the Gauntlet, I'm going back to, I think, December. You can tell me, Lowell, because we played together some Fate of Cthulhu mastered by Alan.
I think it was December or November. I can't remember, but yeah.
Maybe 2016. I don't know at this point.
2016, 2020, same
we
thing.
travel back in time to play it.
Yeah. So Fate of Cthulhu, it's a standalone game powered by Fate Core system. And the campaign revolves around a group of characters, as often in tabletop role-playing games. But this specific group of characters is trying to prevent an eldritch apocalypse. And as far as I understand, you can pick your abomination. Could be Cthulhu himself. In our case, it was Nyarlathotep. And the group includes time travelers. Not all the people in the group are time travelers, but some of them witnessed that apocalypse and travel back in time to stop this. So you have a timeline which tells you what's going to happen and you try to change it. So that's a big feature of the game, I would say. You got this timeline and a timeline modification mechanic, and you see how your adventures, depending how they go, you can impact that timeline and how things go, and you discuss between the players and the game masters what's going to happen. Like, this person who was supposed to be the Antichrist or an avatar of Nyarlathotep now is an ally of us. So what happened instead of that is this or that. So that was quite cool. What worked for me, a great game master. I love playing with Alan. Mm-hmm. Great group of players, including yourself, Lowell.
Of course.
We had Bodhi, and who was the last?
Will H.
Yeah, of course, really.
Oh, yeah. Sounds like a great group.
It was a good group.
Yeah, no, it was very enthusiastic, very proactive when it comes to contributing to the story and involving each other around the table. So that's really an all-star cast. It's my gold standard now. The Gauntlet practices in terms of safety tools, the format, not more than 4 players, the stars and wishes, all this thing. Really, for me, that's what I hope for when I'm joining a game. And sadly, that I don't see that often when I'm outside the Gauntlet. Sometimes, beginning of, and when I do run games outside the Gauntlet, I try to abide to those things nowadays. I really liked the premise of Fate of Cthulhu. I think it's very interesting. I would love to go back to that. I really love our adventures. And I really loved especially how each session was a big change of scenery. Mm-hmm. You had a session in Antarctica, in like The Thing. You had a session in the US South, sort of preacher style a bit. You have a session in Egypt and so on. Each time you jump between places, and that's very exciting. So each time, because we were really tight on time, we jumped straight into the action. And that's also something which, as a grognard myself, some kind, I had a tendency to slow burn things way too much. and so it's great to start a session in the middle. You're already on site doing the thing rather than being in your apartment debating for 2 hours about what's gonna actually happen.
Mm-hmm.
You're there and you sort of worked it out as you go. And finally, influencing the timeline and agreeing about the impact we were having on the event was very, very cool. So that feature of Fate of Cthulhu definitely worked for me.
Yeah, and because it's mechanized and you actually see it and there are items on it, because you know what's going to happen and you're actually changing the numbers on that. And having that as a visual thing and being able to really interact with that was very cool.
Yeah, and I'd be curious to see hacks of that or see it integrated. But at the same time, it works very well with the premise of having time travelers going back.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, there's a Terminator game coming. Are they going to have something like that? You would expect them to have something like that because that's the whole point of the Terminator, or at least it was at some point. I don't know where that's going. So coming back to Fate of Cthulhu, what I'm less sure about, I got frustrated really fast with the character creation. It's a personal taste, it's when I say those things, really, it's not a judgment of quality of the game. It's really how it came across to me.
Caleb says this because he knows that I like Fate, and we've had this discussion.
I say that all the time, for a number of things. People have taste, and I'm really annoyed with a lot of topics when people, especially on Twitter, where you don't have a lot of space, people say things in absolute terms.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's no nuance.
Yeah, I like to put those disclaimers up front. But yeah, for me, the character creation was a weird mix of free form and at the same time being prescriptive and number based. So, for instance, I struggle with the traits. It's like, so it can be anything you want. Okay, can it be this? No, it cannot be that because it's too specific. Okay, can it be this instead? No, it's not specific enough. And I was like, I would have much preferred to have a list of traits to pick from as a beginner, or even have a pre-gens. I'm a big proponent of pre-gen. And finally, the Fate of Cthulhu campaign, I think, deserves more than 6 sessions. It was very, very tight. So it was nice and quick, but it meant we had very, very little breathing space to shine with our characters and get involved and get stressed about things. And in the same matter, because we wanted things to keep going, we were talking about the economy of points and so on, and the knife's edge of things. It felt like we were succeeding all the time, sort of. I never felt we could fail at some point. I never felt that tension. And I think for Fate of Cthulhu to shine, you sort of try, that's sort of one of your goals. But in the end, it was more let's write this story together of those time travelers and going on. But things going to be fine towards the end. So my takeaway, Fate Core might not be for me. People can like mixed things. Again, it is just my personal opinion. But to me, it was sort of... But yeah, Fate of Cthulhu, I love the concept. I think it, again, very cool, the timeline. And I would encourage people to go check it out and hack other version of it without Fate.
So for myself, in terms of gaming for January and February, off the gauntlet, I played quite a lot. I managed to get into quite a few stream games. So off the gauntlet, I got to play Court of Blades. We finished that recently. There's the Forged in the Dark political social intrigue game I'm working on that Lowell and some others are helping me test. It still doesn't quite have a name. I'm almost there. And then there's Hunter's Code and Balikbayan Into the Dark. We started playing that on Asians Represent, and it's been a lot of fun. Some more play testing for Apocalypse Keys. Got to play Keeper of the Cards on Roll20. That was a lot of fun. Yeah, and so Roll20 recently updated the card system. It's a lot easier now. So everybody who's been looking for an alternative for uploading cards and using them in games, it's a lot easier in Roll20 now. And I also got to play Little Katie's Tea Party, which is a lot of fun. One of my highlights also was playing Lighthearted by our own Kurt Potts, and Kurt was a GM. That was a lot of fun. I played that at close to 2 a.m. my time in the Philippines. Totally worth it. It is such a good game. Excellent, excellent game. Yeah, and on the Gauntlet, I didn't get to play as much. I got to play Bite Marks, Cult Classic, and Ma Nishtana, but Next month, I'm definitely playing more on the Gauntlet. Today, what I'm talking about is Ma Nishtana. So, Ma Nishtana is a story game modeled on the Passover Seder. So, it's a ritual meal and collaborative retelling of the Jewish exodus from Egypt. It sounds really serious, and I suppose in a lot of ways it is serious, but it feels very lighthearted when you're playing it. And so players take turns guiding these scenes, perform ritual actions, and collaborate in building a shared world filled with wonder, terror, and deep care. So there's no success or failure. There's no dice rolling in Ma Nishtana. Instead, everyone works together to tell a collaborative story. So there's this wonderful mechanic. It's called Wait, where you ask questions, you argue or introduce complications. And I really like it because it has this feeling of being at a table with your family and going, wait. Right? That's not how it happened, or wait, isn't it something else? And I thought that was so charming. It was so good. Each character has their own playbook. So we have Moses, the Pharaoh, Bitya, Aaron, Zipporah, Miriam. So the playbooks are simple, meaning they're easy to understand, but so beautifully designed. I like how each playbook has 2 moves and a lore. So it's kind of like, I feel like it's a light PBTA game. So as an example for the kind of moves that you can find in a playbook, so I got to play Moses, and one of the moves is when you are expected to speak. So they give you like this little clue as to when you could use the move, which I really appreciate. So when you're expected to speak, hold your tongue. If you do not speak when it is expected of you, you may do one of the following instead. So number 1, ask God any question. Number 2, shift the spotlight, choose any character. Everybody listens to them speak. Or 3, remember, ask something about your past from a relevant character at the table. This is really interesting to play for me. Like, every time people looked at me or talked to me, I could feel like, oh, this is the moment. I'm expected to speak. Am I going to use this move or not? So I liked how the moves were very simple, but because they were framed in such a specific way, it was easy to trigger them. It was easy to know when you would use them. There's also like a lore for each playbook. So for example, Moses' lore is when someone walks alongside you, you get to choose one. Ask, whose long shadow do you stand in? Or ask, what about the path we tread makes it nearly unbearable? Or whisper and share why you are one step away from shattering. And it's really good stuff because the first 2 are like collaborative. So it guides you towards asking questions of the people you're playing with to get them to collaborate on the story. I just thought it's just so beautifully done.
That sounds really cool.
Right?
Yeah.
It's super evocative. It's such a good game. I really enjoyed it. What's really nice is that each ritual, so you play several small rituals in Ma Nishtana, and each one is a part of the original Exodus story. But there's so much room to reinterpret and retell the original story. So, for example, the first time I played it as the Pharaoh, my Pharaoh saved a child that they shouldn't have and became attached to the child. And so, as we were playing that story, as a player, I kept thinking, well, there's Moses the prophet over there, right? And there's this child that I've grown attached to. But the other players brought up, no, I think that child is now the prophet, right? Because the way that you've been talking to them and the way you've been describing what they do, I don't think it's Moses anymore. And I was like, oh, like, it was so shocking to me. And at the same time, in this recent game that I got to play in the Gauntlet, I played Moses, like I said, and God did not part the sea in order to help the people escape from Egypt. Instead, the whole time I had been playing Moses, where the rain and the river and the water was so important. So instead, what happened was Moses said we all have to just trust the ocean and that God will guide us. And as long as we speak of God, the breath of God will protect us. And so instead, we all left our boats and slipped into the water, miraculously walking along the bottom of the ocean until we reached the other side. So it was a very quiet but immense miracle. It was really such a great moment. What worked for me with Ma Nishtana, I think it's very obvious how much I love the game.
It's great.
It's so good. The game is so rules light, but it really encourages so much story, collaboration, and censors the original themes of the story and rituals. I was reviewing the game because I got to play as a player last time, and this time as a facilitator, the host, I was like, I should read through all the rituals. And I was surprised, like, it's this light? There are these few rules? I thought we had such a big story last time. There must have been more rules. So I thought that really spoke positively of the system. Another thing that worked for me is that there's something very true and magical about retelling the story of Exodus. I really don't have the words for it, but in retelling the story, it felt like we're understanding it better. Like the essence and original themes became stronger. Once again, this is thanks to the design placing these themes at the center in very simple but evocative ways. And these larger-than-life people. So even someone like me who's not Jewish, I've heard of Moses, the Pharaoh. I've heard of some of the other characters. But they always felt like any person who's part of this huge story that so many people know. They feel larger than life, right? They don't really feel like people anymore. They're like touched by destiny. But because we're playing these people, and because the playbooks encourage you to play from the place of the heart, they feel so real. What I'm less sure about, so there are very few things I'm not so sure about. I feel like I say this with so many games, but I worry that people will think this game is not for them.
Yeah.
I worry, right? Like if I tell you, an average person, oh, this is a game about the Jewish Passover, like I can imagine people just like freezing up a little bit, like
Yeah, and it can come from a good or a bad place. It can be like, I'm not interested in that, as well as actually I'm not sure if I'm a bit concerned that what I could do within that game might be considered inappropriate to Jewish people. So it can be well intended and poorly intended, that sort of move away.
Yeah, exactly. And I fully understand, because when Ben asked me to playtest the game the first time, I was also worried. I'm really glad I went ahead and played the game, and I hope other people will go ahead and try it. It's currently in open beta, very easy to access, so you can just check it out on itch.io. It's there for anyone to access. And another thing I'm not so sure about is the game asks you to be creative when setting each scene, the start of each ritual. So it's very, very open. I feel this may be daunting to players who aren't used to being spontaneous and creative on the spot. I do feel the game gives you a lot of tools because the playbooks are so strong, the questions are so strong, the moves are so strong, but it does ask you to be creative on the spot. But once you get that ball rolling, once you get used to it, it just flows really, really beautifully. And I think because it's so open, that means it's so easy to play it over and over again. So my main takeaways about Ma Nishtana is we were all so moved by this game, and we all agreed we'd love to see more story games that move away from centering task resolution as the main mechanic. So, of course, I still love games that have us roll dice. That's super exciting. There's nothing more exciting than rolling dice for a lot of these games. Games can be powerful, and reflecting on faith and family in this way is incredibly, incredibly powerful. We all talked about the potential of this game structure, how it can be used to meditate on other truths and stories. I would love to see more of that. I'll definitely be playing this game again, like I said, and I'm looking forward to its final release. This game is truly special. I think it's one of my favorite games now.
It's a remarkable game. I put it in my top 5 last year.
Oh, top 5, see.
Super white dude from Midwest America felt so welcomed into a group that we played with. It was so good. The game itself is so good. It's unlike anything I've ever seen, but in like that way that you go, once you see it, you're like, oh yeah, you could go in and look at these stories and retell them in a way that helps you unpack what they are and what they mean. Again, that same thing of having a structure for a GM-less game that really facilitates that, but gives you room. It's an unbelievably good game.
Hi listeners, I want to let you know about Codex Starlight 2, the newest issue of our indie role-playing game magazine, coming to the Gauntlet Patreon feed in early March. Codex Starlight 2 is one of the biggest and best issues yet, and it features Snipe Hunt, an original game inspired by movies like Red Dawn and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, in which a teenager takes a group of kids out into the woods for a snipe hunt in order to protect them from a calamity taking place in the town they live in. Bed, Breakfast, and Beyond, a one-shot hack of Brindlewood Bay about an elderly gay couple who run a bed and breakfast trying to figure out why guests keep disappearing from room 3. The Temple of the Peerless Star, a trophy gold incursion inspired by the dungeon made famous in the Discern Realities podcast and later published for Dungeon World in the original Codex Starlight. We've taken the core of that dungeon and expanded it for trophy gold, and it's great. 3 dozen more signs the stars are right, a miscellaneous sequel, 7 original illustrations, and a custom layout. You can get Codex Starlight 2 in the Gauntlet Patreon feed in March by making a $6 pledge. That's at patreon.com/gauntlet. Thanks.
Listeners, in our second segment, Callum will be talking about a topic of his choice. So, Callum, what did you want to discuss with us today?
What I find fascinating is that we debate a lot about systems, settings, and people present things. That's Brindlewood Bay, that's this sort of game. Oh, that's Fate, that's this sort of game. Oh, that's Call of Cthulhu, that's this sort of game. I haven't seen much discussion, much effort to develop a vocabulary to describe our styles of play.
Exactly.
We tend to assume that the style is the style of the game, and I'm at loss of vocabulary if I want to engage. We got the lines and veils, we got the session 0, you got all the interesting information. Again, the Gauntlet for me is the gold standard with that, but I don't have the words or the space to have a conversation or read about a game master. So
exactly.
What kind of game master are you, and what kind of player are you looking for? Because I'm looking for something somewhat specific. Right now, it's a bit... I played with a few game masters, and again, it's not about having bad experience. All my experiences were great, but I haven't seen the vocabulary or the discussion taking place about that, because we always assume that that's the system. That's what you're expected from D&D.
Yeah, and I get very confused about that, because when people say D&D is this game, I get confused because I think D&D has been very different things to me depending on the GM, especially the GM. I feel like there are some systems that are more GM heavy and are more easily shifted depending on the GM style. But I do feel like there are some story games, because there are structures in place like moves and traits and stats, that these things are supposed to inform what the game is like. But I think you're right. We don't quite have the language there yet. And I think we take for granted that this game of Brindlewood Bay is the same everywhere. This game of Fate is the same everywhere, when we know that's not true. So why don't we have the words for it?
D&D is a nice landing point for this sort of discussions, I find, because my biggest frustration with D&D is people saying, we play D&D, and you show up at a game of D&D and they play D&D in a way which they enjoy. And again, I'm not being critical, but they have fun despite D&D, because what they're doing, clearly D&D is not made for, and they're having fun. So great. No issue with that.
Exactly.
My frustration is when you start saying, you know what you're doing, maybe if you would try this other system, actually could work a little bit better. And, you do it as a way to sort of encourage curiosity, and the curiosity is shut down. That's where I'm critical of people lacking curiosity. I personally find it's a loss for everyone that curiosity is not encouraged overall. That's my frustration with a part of the D&D crowd. It's not what they do, is that they're not curious about other things, especially when they're actually doing a thing with D&D, which is, that's very nice, this screwdriver you're using to hammer a nail. But what about trying a hammer? Oh, no, I love this hammer. I've been using this hammer all my life. And the screwdriver, and it works very well to nail things to the wall. And you're like, okay, there's not that much discourse about that.
There's the idea that I've read the owner's manual to how to use this screwdriver, and I don't want to have to read an owner's manual on how to use this hammer. Jason Cordova has a thing he says, enough that we had it on a t-shirt for a while, which is, system matters.
Yes.
But play culture matters more.
Yes.
Older I get, the more true I think that is. And I think that it does. I mean, it shapes what it is, because my apocalypse world is vastly different from, say, Rich's apocalypse world, or my masks is very different from how other people do masks and stuff. I think GMs can describe what they'd like to do at the table. But I don't think GMs have the greatest perception on what they actually do at the table.
Yeah.
Once you get that variable hitting against what the players are doing, and we've got two discrete variables that are changing at the same time that are hitting against it. And I don't think we have a great vocabulary for that. You're right.
Yeah. And I think that's why streaming and podcasts, actual plays are so important, because people are seeing all these different styles, all these different ways of GMing. I think it's helping to improve the conversation, but we're still not quite there yet. Because when we talk about GMs, it's I feel like we've been having the same conversations about GMs for like years now, where it's more like the GM is a player too.
One of the things that comes out of this, not thinking of the GM as a player, is that GMs get this sense of priority and that they don't go and play games. They decouple their sense of what it is to be a GM and what it is to be a player. And they're like, well, I'm really a GM and I don't want to go play. And I've been guilty of this in the past. But I have learned so much in these last few years playing with Alan, playing with Jamie, playing with Rich, playing with Tyler, about what I can do at the table. And I think that a GM has to understand that they're a player to be able to go and play and get a better perspective on how what they're doing is shaping the table.
I absolutely agree.
I want to know how you've integrated this into Paris Gondo in your work.
Well, the thing is, so Paris Gondo, the life-saving magic of inventorying, the very short pitch is, what if Marie Kondo was giving advice to murder hobos? The idea is that you start the adventure at the end of the dungeon, you defeated the big bad evil creature which was ruling that dungeon, and you find the loot. So you need to decide what you're going to keep with you and what you're going to throw away, because it does not spark joy. And depending on what you succeed at or not, what you keep or not, you will have more or less chances of first surviving the way home, getting out of the dungeon individually or as a group, and finally having a stimulating and invigorating life experience until the rest of your days, because you kept things which spark joy. But when I wrote the rules, I kept them very tight, and they could be considered almost a management system. You know, you got 3 stats and you keep things and you make exchange cards to have a certain total, and then you roll above or under that. But what really helped me when I wrote the book, which is still in progress, is because I'm very attached to Japan, because Marie Kondo herself is from Japan. I had a look at what's the format of games in Japan, and they have very often, they are front-ended with a replay, which is an actual play in text form. It's a transcript of a session, which is barely edited. It's really raw, so this player stands up and grab a glass of water and this sort of thing.
Oh, yeah.
But having this replay text in my game book really helped me communicate across everything which is not in the rules, which are more about the practice, the culture, the spirit behind the rules and the spirit of the game that you're trying to achieve. Because rather than say, and when you do that, you should say something funny. Ha ha ha. No, I've got an example of a game session when you see how things can go very gonzo if you want. And you can be very imaginative with what you do. But having a example of a session I thought was very liberating for me when writing the rules, to make sure they were just very clear in their mechanical side, but telling about the spirit of the game, the culture elsewhere. And also it helped me having a thicker book, because since there's no setting, this way I've got something to put in my book. But that's where I'm at. And I really like system which structure. I really enjoy Becoming, Game of Heroism, of Sacrifice. I like games which structure a free form. So I'm very excited about this game. And if anyone cares to try it, I'm happy to run a session for you. Or I'm especially curious to find people who would be willing to just read what I wrote and try to run the game without my intervention, because that's sort of the next step I'm very curious about, and see if it's working, actually, if this replay really does get some messages across and inspiration for people to play.
Awesome.
Definitely looking forward to that. Listeners, in our final segment, each of us talks about something which is creating joy. We were just talking about sparking joy, right? Which is creating joy for us right now. So we will start with Dun 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 dun. Lowell, what is giving you life right now?
I have to preface this by saying the fairy tale, manga, and anime is terrible. It is full of fan service. It's not great. I've watched a bunch of it. I've read some of the manga. It is boobalicious throughout, but the story is pretty good from time to time. But I've been playing this fairy tale JRPG on the PS4 that came out last year. It's not a great game. It is not a great game. It is a grind game. But it weirdly, it's like telling the story of like the second arc, which is not one I haven't read, very linearly. Like sometimes there'll be stuff that they clearly can't put into combat settings, so you get this cutscene and then we move forward. It is a weird way to experience like a story. It's terrible, but it's kind of relaxing and dumb. And I don't know why I'm enjoying it as much as I am. It's giving me life because it's weird and goofy and has a lot of characters.
There are lots of things that are making us happy and we can't quite parse how that works.
Yeah.
And of course, I have to ask Callum, what is giving you life?
So what gives me life every day is Paul Rivers and Alan Reese encouraging my weekly gym in the fitness section of the Slack. But beyond that, I'm really, really enjoying WandaVision at the moment.
Yeah.
So good.
It's so much about the meta.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been so much fun to watch. And those 30 minutes go by so fast.
Everyone seen episode 7? Can we sing?
Yeah.
Can we sing the song?
Yeah.
It was na all along. We won't name that individual. But...
So good, so good. In terms of what's been giving me life, my partner Matthew has put together, or is in the middle of putting together, this Spotify playlist called Vampires in Love, because recently we found out that the song Total Eclipse of the Heart from the 80s was supposed to be part of this theater play that was supposed to be about vampires in love. The song was supposed to be called Vampires in Love, right? And I was like, what? Like, I could have gotten an 80s, musical about vampires in love. What is this? So based on that, Matthew has been building this playlist. And so as I've been working on editing and all these other things, I just play that so loud. I actually ruined my voice at one point because I was singing the songs for 2-3 hours. But that's definitely been giving me life. It's a really, really good playlist.
It's a playlist you will put a link to in the description of the episode, I hope.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So, listeners, that's our show. The Gauntlet Podcast is a production of The Gauntlet. We have an online gaming calendar, the Gauntlet Calendar, where folks can sign up for our sessions. You can talk to us about play culture as much as you like as we get into it. So if you've enjoyed this show, consider supporting our Patreon at patreon.com/gauntlet. That supports everything we do, including our network of podcasts and our magazine Codex. You can find out more about all of that at gauntlet-rpg.com. You can also reach us on Twitter at GauntletRPG or on Facebook at the gauntlet.rpg group. So also please consider rating and reviewing our show. It really helps us out. Thank you so much, Callum, for joining us today. I had such a good time talking to you about System and Fate of Cthulhu and seeing you and Lowell having very different opinions. I was very... I wish people
some
could
of
see
us
the
being
video.
right and some of us being wrong.
True.
It was amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Lowell, for joining me, for being my
absolutely.
co-host.
Thank you.
It's always such a pleasure to have you. Everybody will see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye!
Bye. See ya.